finishing up variances and therefore finishing up chapter 9. So this is awesome. We need to account for our overhead variances. So it needs to get into work in process from overhead control. So remember, overhead is really not just one account, right? So there is one control account for variable and one control account for fixed. But in reality, if you recall, fixed here consisted of depreciation, salaries, taxes, and insurance. So there's 4 separate accounts that are going into fixed overhead control. And variable, I think they had electricity, gas, electricity, and water. So they had 3 accounts, right? So there's 3 accounts going into overhead control, and then to move from overhead control into our work in process inventory, you debit work in process because it's an inventory, an asset, increases debits, and these are control accounts for the expenses, so they are going to decrease with credits. All right, to recognize the incurrence of actual overhead, right? So when you get your bills for electricity and stuff, you are crediting various accounts and debiting overhead control. And to recognize the variances, you're moving them into overhead control. And then you're going to close them to cost of goods sold. And I do an example of this in problem 930, but it's not something I'm going to expect you all to really know that well for the exam. All right, so to show you the variances in a picture form, okay, you don't have to do it this way. You can use those formulas, right? But if you think about it, actual overhead, applied overhead, budgeted overhead. Here's the volume variance, here's the budget variance, here's the total variance, right? So you can picture kind of how they work. And you can also picture for yourself the variable overhead analysis, right? And get your total variances. But again, your questions on your exam will just ask you, what was the variable overhead efficiency variance? Well, you can just apply the formula. No big deal at all. All right, so I think that's about it for Chapter 9. I would strongly suggest you go watch me work 9.30 so that you're good at calculating the variances. The very last part of 930, I do the journal entries, but like I said, I'm not that concerned. So I would strongly suggest you check out 9.30 when I work the problem, and I think that really helps. Variances are a little confusing until you work the problems, in my opinion. Maybe not for you. They were for me when I first started thinking about them. All right, good luck with Chapter 9, and get in touch if you need to.